Her face was his canvas, but her heart was off limits. I still see her in my dreams, standing in the doorway of my studio, sunlight weaving through her hair like a secret I wasn't meant to know. Clara. Her name was a whisper, a brush stroke I couldn't erase, a sound that lingered in the quiet corners of my mind long after she was gone. She was married to Daniel, my friend of 20 years, the man who'd seen me through my darkest days, when my hands shook so badly I couldn't hold a brush, when my art was nothing but ash and regret scattered across a life I barely recognized. But Clara, she was a spark, a dangerous flare in a heart gone cold. And I was the fool who let it catch, who let it burn until it consumed me. Every stroke hit a love I could never speak. I'd spent my life chasing beauty, landscapes that stretched into forever, shadows that danced across forgotten walls, fleeting moments I tried to trap on canvas, but nothing prepared me for her. Her eyes, sharp yet soft, held stories I'd never unravel but needed to paint, needed to understand. Each session, I'd watch her sit, her silhouette carved against the window like a figure from a dream, and my chest would tighten until I could barely breathe. My fingers trembled, not from the age creeping into my bones, but from the weight of wanting her. Wanting to know her. To keep her in every line, every shade of color, every curve of paint that felt like a confession. But she was his. Always his. And I was just the man with the easel, painting a dream I could never touch, a dream I knew would destroy me. Was she my muse, or my forbidden obsession? I'd asked myself that every night, staring at her half-finished portrait, her eyes staring back, accusing me, pulling me apart. I'd spent decades capturing shadows, but Clara was light, light I'd never hold, light that burned me every time I tried to get close. Each brushstroke felt like a sin, a theft, a secret I couldn't wash away, no matter how hard I scrubbed my hands under the faucet at midnight. I told myself, just paint her. Nothing more. But the truth? I was falling. Falling for the one woman I could never have, the one woman whose presence made me feel alive and damned in the same breath. And the worst part? I think she knew. I think she saw the way my hands shook when I said her name, the way my voice caught when our eyes met for too long. And yet she kept coming back, sitting there in my studio, letting me paint her, letting me drown in her. Have you ever felt a pull so strong it scared you? A longing so deep it felt like a betrayal of everything you are? That's what this story's about. A man, a brush, a woman he couldn't have, and the art that held it all together, fragile and fleeting. Stick with me, because this is the kind of longing that carves itself into your soul, the kind that haunts you long after the paint dries, long after the canvas is gone. I was 57 when Clara walked into my life, a worn-out painter with nothing left but a cluttered studio and a name that used to mean something in galleries long forgotten. My hands had started betraying me years ago, the tremors stealing the precision I'd spent decades honing, the lines that once flowed like music now jagged and uncertain. Canvases sat untouched, gathering dust in corners, mocking me with their emptiness. I'd lost the fire, the hunger that kept me up all night, chasing beauty no one else could see, chasing a truth I thought I could capture. Daniel, my oldest friend, was the only one who still believed in me, who refused to let me disappear into my own darkness. He'd show up with coffee, his laughter a lifeline I didn't deserve, dragging me out of my gloom with stories of his life, his plans, his world. He was steady, grounded, the kind of man who made the world feel solid, like you could lean against it and it wouldn't crumble. And then he brought her. Clara was 32, with eyes that didn't just look at you, they saw you, saw the parts you hid even from yourself. Not the Marcus who smiled and nodded at their wedding 2 years ago, clapping for Daniel like the good friend I was supposed to be, but the one hiding behind the easel, the one who'd forgotten how to feel alive, who'd forgotten what it meant to want something. She wasn't loud or flashy, not the kind of woman who demanded attention, but her presence was like a quiet storm, shifting the air in ways you didn't notice until it was too late, until you were caught in it. Her smile was soft, almost hesitant, and when she brushed her hair behind her ear, I'd catch myself staring, my breath catching like I was 20 again, like I hadn't spent years burying myself in failure. I'd been at their wedding, standing in the back, watching her move through the room like she carried a secret, her laughter bright but guarded, her eyes catching mine for a moment too brief to mean anything. Or so I told myself. But I wasn't ready for her. Not really. It started with a simple request, innocent enough to fool me into thinking it wouldn't ruin me. Daniel wanted a portrait for their anniversary, something to hang in their home, something to mark their life together. "You're the best, Marcus," he'd said, his hand heavy on my shoulder, his grin wide and trusting. "Make her look like the angel she is." I laughed, brushing it off like it was nothing, like I could paint his wife and not lose myself in the process. But the moment Clara stepped into my studio, everything changed. She sat on the stool, her hands folded in her lap, her posture poised but not stiff, and the light from the window hit her just right, catching the curve of her cheek, the faint freckles across her nose, like the room had been waiting for her all along, like it had been empty without her. I picked up my brush, and for the first time in years my hands were steady, the tremors gone as if she'd willed them away. It was like she'd unlocked something in me, something I thought was dead, buried under years of doubt and failure. Our sessions were quiet at first, the kind of silence that feels alive, heavy with things unsaid. I'd ask her to tilt her head, adjust her posture, and she'd nod, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction too long, a heartbeat too long. I'd fill the space with small talk, about the weather, the paint, the creak of the old studio floor that groaned under every step. But it was her presence that spoke loudest, that filled the room with a weight I couldn't ignore. The way she sat, so still yet so alive, made my chest ache, made my fingers itch to capture more than just her face. I'd catch myself wondering what she was thinking, what hid behind those eyes that seemed to see too much. Did she feel the weight of my gaze, the way it lingered on the curve of her jaw, the softness of her lips? Did she know how every brushstroke felt like a theft, like I was stealing pieces of her I had no right to take, pieces I'd carry with me long after she was gone? I told myself it was just art. Just a portrait. Just a favor for a friend. But every session pulled me deeper, like a tide I couldn't fight. At night, I'd sketch her from memory, my hands moving faster than my mind could keep up, trying to capture the curve of her jaw, the way her lips parted when she was lost in thought, the way her eyes seemed to hold a question I'd never answer. I'd tell myself it was for the painting, for the craft, but it wasn't. It was for me. For the part of me that hadn't felt alive in years, that hadn't wanted anything in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. And the guilt? It was there, sharp and relentless, a blade twisting in my gut every time I thought of Daniel, every time I remembered his trust, his friendship, his hand on my shoulder. He'd never suspect his friend was falling for his wife, would he? But Clara, she was waking something in me, something I couldn't control, something I wasn't sure I wanted to control. And that scared me more than anything. The sessions became my lifeline, the only thing keeping me tethered to the world. 3 times a week, Clara would sit in my studio, and I'd lose myself in her, not just her face, but the way she existed, the way she filled the room without trying. The way her fingers traced the edge of the stool, slow and deliberate, like she was memorizing its texture. The way her breath caught when I leaned too close to adjust the light, my hand brushing the air near her shoulder, close enough to feel the warmth of her but never touching. Every moment felt stolen, dangerous, like I was walking a tightrope over a truth I couldn't face, a truth that would unravel everything. I'd tell myself to stop, to focus on the canvas, to be the artist I was supposed to be. But my eyes kept finding her, lingering on the way her hair fell against her neck, the way her lips curved when she thought I wasn't looking. Every glance was a betrayal, not just of Daniel, but of the man I thought I was. I was an artist, not a thief. But with her, the line was blurring, fading, until I wasn't sure it existed at all. The painting took shape, and it was good, better than anything I'd done in decades, maybe ever. Her face stared back from the canvas, alive in ways I couldn't explain, in ways that scared me. Her eyes, sharp and soft, held a depth that made my chest ache, a truth I couldn't capture no matter how hard I tried. I'd catch Clara studying it, her expression unreadable, Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. And I'd wonder, did she see it too? The longing I'd poured into every stroke, every shade of blue and gold? Did she know how much of me was in that paint, how much of my heart I'd laid bare? Or was it all in my head, a delusion born of too many lonely nights, too many years spent chasing something I'd never hold? One afternoon, she broke the silence, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Why do you paint, Marcus?" It was soft but pointed, like she was reaching for something I hadn't offered, something I wasn't sure I could give. I froze, brush in hand, the question catching me off guard. No one had asked me that in years, not like that, not with that kind of weight. I mumbled something about beauty, about capturing truth, but she shook her head, her eyes locking on mine. "No." "Why do you paint?" The world stopped, the air thick with the unspoken. I wanted to tell her the truth, that I painted because of her, because she'd brought color back to a life gone gray, because every stroke was a way to keep her close, to make her real in a way I could never have her. But I didn't. I just smiled, my throat tight, and said, "It's all I've got." Her gaze lingered, like she was waiting for more, like she could see the lie in my eyes. And I felt the air shift, heavy with something neither of us could name, something that scared me as much as it thrilled me. That was when it changed. The silence between us grew thicker, charged with questions we didn't ask, with truths we didn't dare voice. She'd linger after sessions, her fingers brushing the edges of old canvases, asking about paintings I'd long forgotten, paintings I'd made in another life. I'd catch her watching me, not the canvas, her eyes soft but searching, like she was looking for something I didn't know how to give. My heart would race, my mind spiraling with questions I couldn't answer. Was she just curious? Or was there something more, something I was too afraid to hope for? I hated myself for even thinking it, for letting my mind wander to places it had no right to go. But the question wouldn't leave me. Did she feel it too, the pull, the ache, the thing we weren't saying? The guilt was a constant shadow, a weight I carried in every breath. Daniel would stop by, all smiles, oblivious to the storm inside me. He'd talk about their life together, dinners, vacations, a future I had no place in, a future I couldn't even imagine without feeling like I was drowning. He'd look at the painting and grin, his eyes bright with pride. "You're a genius, Marcus," he'd say, clapping my shoulder, and I'd nod, my stomach twisting, my heart screaming. I was betraying him with every brushstroke, every stolen glance, every moment I let myself want her. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. Clara was more than a muse, she was the reason I woke up, the reason I could hold a brush again, the reason I felt anything at all. And that scared me more than anything, because it meant I was no longer in control. One evening, she stayed late, long after the sun had set, the studio lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp. I was cleaning my brushes, the rhythm of it grounding me, keeping me from falling apart. She was still there, sitting on the stool, her coat draped over her arm, her eyes fixed on the floor. "You don't talk about yourself," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet like a whisper in a church. "Why not?" I laughed, trying to deflect, trying to keep the walls up, but she didn't smile. She stood, stepping closer, and I felt the air shift, heavy and electric. "I want to know you, Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes locking on mine. My heart stopped, the world narrowing to the space between us. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her everything, how she'd become my reason to breathe, how every stroke was a love letter I'd never send, how I'd trade every painting I'd ever made just to know what she was thinking in that moment. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, the weight of her words crushing me. I mumbled something about needing to lock up, my voice hollow, and she nodded, her eyes lingering on mine for a moment too long. When she left, I sank to the floor, my hands shaking, my chest tight with everything I hadn't said. I was in too deep. And I didn't know how to climb out. The next session, she was quieter, her eyes distant, like she was carrying a weight of her own. I painted in silence, my mind racing, replaying her words, her look, the way she'd stood so close I could smell the faint lavender of her perfume. Had I imagined it? That moment, her words, the way she looked at me? Or was she pulling back, scared of the same thing I was? I wanted to ask, to demand answers, to break the silence that was suffocating us. But I didn't. I just kept painting, each stroke a prayer, a plea, a confession I'd never voice. I was falling, and I couldn't stop. But the worst part? I wasn't sure I wanted to. I wasn't sure I could live without her, without the way she made me feel, without the way she made the world vivid again. The painting was nearly finished, but I kept finding reasons to delay, excuses to keep her coming back. A shadow wasn't right, too harsh against the curve of her cheek. The light needed tweaking, a softer glow to match the warmth in her eyes. Anything to keep Clara in my studio, in my life, even if it was just for an hour at a time. Each session was a dance, her sitting still, me circling her with my brush, both of us pretending the silence wasn't alive with everything we didn't say. I'd catch her watching me, her eyes soft but searching, and I'd wonder what she saw. An old man chasing a ghost? A fool painting a dream he'd never live? Or something else, something I didn't dare hope for, something that kept me awake at night, my heart pounding with the possibility? One afternoon, she brought a sketchbook of her own, a worn leather book that looked like it held a lifetime of secrets. "I used to draw," she said, her voice soft but steady, flipping through pages of delicate pencil lines, flowers with petals so fragile they seemed to wilt under my gaze, faces half-sketched like memories she couldn't hold on to, fragments of a life I'd never know. I leaned closer, my shoulder brushing hers, and for a moment neither of us moved. Her breath itched, a sound so faint I might have imagined it, and I felt it, the pull, the ache, the thing we weren't saying. My heart pounded, my mind screaming to step back, to remember Daniel, to remember who I was. But I didn't move. Not at first. Her hand grazed mine, just for a second, her fingers cool against my skin, and it was enough to break me. I stepped back, muttering an apology, my voice rough, but her touch lingered, a ghost on my skin, a memory I'd carry forever. I knew I was lost, drowning in something I couldn't name, something I didn't want to name. I started painting her from memory, late at night when the studio was empty, when the world was quiet and my thoughts were too loud. Not just her face, but her hands, the way they curled around the edge of the stool, the way her posture shifted when she thought I wasn't watching, the way her head tilted when she was lost in thought. Each sketch was a confession, a piece of me I couldn't take back, a truth I couldn't hide. I'd hide them in a drawer, buried under old sketches and broken charcoal, terrified Daniel would see, terrified Clara would know. But I couldn't stop. She was in my blood now, in every stroke, every breath, every moment I spent trying to capture her. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her face burned into my mind, her voice echoing in my ears. I'd tell myself it was just art, just inspiration, just a muse doing what muses do. But it wasn't. It was obsession, raw and relentless, and the guilt was eating me alive, gnawing at the edges of my soul. The tension grew heavier with every session, the air thick with things we didn't say, things we couldn't say. She'd talk more, her voice soft but deliberate, like she was testing me, probing the edges of my silence. She'd ask about my past, my failures, the paintings I'd burned in fits of rage, the years I'd spent running from myself, from the man I used to be. I'd answer in fragments, afraid to give too much away, afraid she'd see the truth I was hiding. But her questions weren't casual, not anymore. They were pointed, like she was trying to peel back my layers, to find the man beneath the artist. "You're lonely, aren't you?" she said once, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper, and I nearly dropped my brush, my heart stopping in my chest. I laughed it off, a hollow sound that fooled no one, but her eyes didn't waver. She saw me, saw the parts of me I'd buried long ago. And that scared me more than anything, because it meant I wasn't invisible to her. It meant she might see the truth. One evening, she arrived late, her hair damp from the rain, clinging to her neck in a way that made my hands ache to paint her again. She didn't sit right away, just stood by the window, staring out at the dark, her reflection faint in the glass. Do you ever feel trapped? She asked, her voice so quiet I almost missed it, so fragile it broke something in me. I froze, my brush hovering over the canvas, my mind racing. Was she talking about her marriage? Her life? Me? The question hung between us, heavy and unanswered. I wanted to ask, to demand the truth, to know what she meant, what she felt. But I didn't. I just nodded, my throat tight, and said, "Sometimes." She turned to me, her eyes glistening in the dim light, and for a moment I thought she might cry, might let the walls between us crumble. But she didn't. She just sat down and let me paint her, the silence heavier than ever, pressing down on us like a weight neither of us could carry. I started to hate the painting, hate what it had become. It was too good, too real, too much of me. It held everything I felt, every longing, every guilt, every stolen moment that lived in the space between us. I'd catch Clara staring at it, her expression unreadable, her fingers twitching like she wanted to touch it but didn't dare. And I'd wonder, did she see it too? Did she know how much of my soul was in those colors, how much of my heart I'd poured into every stroke? Did she care? The thought that she might not, that this was all in my head, was worse than the guilt, worse than the betrayal. But then she'd look at me, her eyes soft and searching, and I'd feel it again, that pull, that ache, that thing we weren't saying, that thing that was tearing me apart. One day, Daniel stopped by unexpectedly, his laughter filling the studio as he walked in, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. Clara was there, sitting for a session, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. The air shifted when he entered, like a storm breaking, and I watched her, waiting for her to light up like she used to when he was around, waiting for the smile that used to come so easily. But she didn't. Her smile was tight, her eyes distant, like she was somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't reach. He talked about a trip they were planning, his voice bright and carefree, and I nodded, forcing a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. When he left, she didn't move, just sat there, her hands clenched in her lap, her breath uneven. "He doesn't see me," she whispered, so soft I wasn't sure I heard it right, so soft it felt like a secret she hadn't meant to share. I wanted to ask what she meant, to pull the truth out of her, to know if she was as lost as I was. But I didn't. I just picked up my brush and kept painting, my heart pounding, her words echoing in my mind like a confession I wasn't ready to hear. Did she mean it? Was she unhappy? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see, what I needed to see to justify the storm inside me? The sessions grew unbearable, each one a step closer to something I couldn't come back from. Every glance, every word, every silence felt like a thread pulling tighter, threatening to snap. I'd catch myself leaning too close, my breath catching when her eyes met mine, the air between us electric with everything we didn't say. I'd tell myself to stop, to finish the painting, to let her go. But I couldn't. She was my muse, my light, my everything. And the guilt was killing me, a slow poison that seeped into every moment, every thought, every stroke of my brush. I was betraying Daniel, betraying myself, but I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep her here, in my studio, in my life, even if it destroyed me. The painting was done. I couldn't stall anymore, couldn't find another excuse to keep her coming back. Clara came for the final session, and I unveiled it, my hands shaking, my heart in my throat. She stared at it, her breath catching, her eyes wide and glistening, and for a moment I thought she might cry. "It's me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But it's you too." I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to tell her she was right. Every stroke was a piece of me, a love I'd never speak, a sin I'd carry forever. The canvas held everything, my longing, my guilt, my heart, laid bare in colors I couldn't take back. She reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the canvas, and I felt it, the weight of everything we hadn't said, everything we'd never say. I wanted to tell her I loved her, that I'd paint her 1,000 times if it meant keeping her here, keeping her close. But I didn't. I just stood there, silent, as she turned to me, her eyes holding mine, searching for something I couldn't give. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her voice soft and broken, like a promise unkept. For a moment, I thought she might say more, might let the truth spill out, but she didn't. She just picked up her coat and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the empty studio, each one a nail in my heart. The door closed, and I was alone with her ghost, with the painting that held everything I'd never have. I gave the painting to Daniel the next day, my hands steady but my chest hollow. He loved it, called it a masterpiece, his eyes bright with pride as he clapped my shoulder. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, I was breaking. I never saw Clara again. They moved away a few months later, to a city I didn't ask about, a life I couldn't imagine. I couldn't bear to know, couldn't bear the thought of her living somewhere I'd never reach. But every time I pick up a brush, I see her face, her eyes, the way she looked at me that final day. I feel her presence, like a shadow I can't shake, a light I can't hold. And I wonder, does she ever think of me, of the man who loved her through his art, who poured his soul into a canvas she'd never truly know? Does she ever look at that painting, hanging in their home, and see me in it, see the truth I hid in every stroke? Have you ever loved someone through your work, pouring your heart into something they'll never fully understand, something that holds every piece of you? Share it below, tell me your story. Hit like if his painting spoke to your soul, if you felt the weight of his longing. And if this story made you feel his silent ache, share it with someone who'd understand, someone who knows what it's like to love in the quiet spaces. Because some loves, they live in the shadows, in the brushstrokes, in the moments we can never speak, forever unspoken, forever haunting.